Welcome to Legacy Planning with the LSPN. This week we're talking about legacy planning, and most weeks we rotate through different topics, but all related to protecting your family, protecting your estate, making sure you have the right legal documents in place, and planning for the future. So today we're going to be talking about legacy planning, and specifically the perspective of how to leave a legacy of charitable giving, how to leave a legacy of good works, and to be able to promote that through your family, and specifically through a very powerful instrument called a family foundation. So, a lot of times we've had conversations with individuals who say, I want to save money on taxes, and I want to look at options to be able to reduce my tax exposure for income taxes. And one of the powerful strategies that we use for that is a family foundation. Sometimes we have conversations with clients and they say, I don't have anybody that I need to leave my estate to, and I have assets that I'm going to leave behind, and I want to make sure that it's going to be used for a good cause, right? It's going to go to a good cause. It's going to do some good in the world. But I don't want to just leave it to an established charity, because I've heard a lot of stories about charities that don't use all the money for, the charitable purposes, or maybe I want it to be spread out among other, multiple organizations and multiple programs and that sort of thing. So again, family foundation is a perfect strategy for that type of situation. And we have other situations where people say, well, I want to teach my kids to go out and do good things, and to be able to kind of help them to be in a position to be able to do charitable work. How do I instill those values into them? And again, a family foundation might be the answer. So we're going to talk about some of the details of how to use this instrument, but let me share a story with you. We had a client that came in. We just did a basic trust plan for their situation to make sure that they're protecting their estate and their family in the case of probate, and in the case of them passing away, and emergency situations and so on. But he told me a story, and he said, it was, I guess, the previous Christmas, December, that had come up, and during that Christmas, they wanted to teach their kids about charitable giving and about doing good things for others, and not thinking about themselves. And this is, it's a middle income family. It's not, a huge estate. They don't have a lot of means, but they wanted to focus on this with their kids. And so for this Christmas, they said, instead of getting Christmas presents, we're going to give you money, and you're going to use that money to do something good for other people, because they wanted to teach them about giving. And so they have 4 kids. They gave each one of them, I think it was $100. And so that other people, because they wanted to teach them about giving. And so they have 4 kids. They gave each one of them, I think it was $100. And so that was, what they had to work with for this project. And so the first child says, okay, well, I have a friend of mine who's sick in the hospital, and I want to make sure that they have a good Christmas. So he used that $100 to buy them Christmas presents. The second child said, I know that there's a lot of animals that don't get adopted, and that they're in the shelters, and so they donated the money to one of the local animal shelters, so that that they could take care of the animals there, and help place them with families. The third child said, I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but it had something to do with, giving it to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, so that they could go out and help somebody's wish come true. But the fourth child said, $100 isn't enough. And they happened to know somebody who had cancer and was in the hospital. And they said, there's a lot of kids that need help. So with that $100, they bought lemons and all the equipment and everything to do a lemonade stand. And they started raising money through the lemonade stand. And they raised about $300, maybe $350 or so. But they started spreading the word of what they were trying to do. And the next thing you know, there was, several people who started making contributions to be able to help the cause. And then the word spread a little bit more. And before you knew it, they had raised over $2,000 to be able to go help a children's hospital and be able to make a difference. Sometimes we want to instill in our kids, in our family, in our loved ones, we want to instill these values, and we think that it might be enough for us to just tell them. But what we really need to do is we need to show them. And so the purpose of giving through your private foundation, your family foundation, is really to have this situation where you have the control, because then you can show the example of giving on an ongoing basis, of doing charitable work, and you don't have to feel bad about it because the money's already earmarked for that purpose. So that I love that story. It's a true story, but also because it's something that I aspire to for my own family, to teach my kids, how giving should be, and what some of the things that they can do, and how to maximize and do more for the world than maybe what we think is possible from the beginning. So I had the opportunity to establish my own family foundation last year, and I want to share with you guys, there are two ways that you can set up a private foundation. You can have a foundation that's a non-operating foundation, or you can have a foundation that's an operating foundation. And the difference between the two and which one you would want to use is really dependent on your personal situation. But for the first type of foundation, a non-operating foundation, the way it works is basically any private foundation it falls under the 501c3 guidelines. So everybody thinks that a 501c3 has to be a public charity, a public organization. But the reality is that there are multiple types of 501c3s, and the most common ones are the 501c3 public charity, and then the other option is a private foundation. In a public charity, you have to set up a board, and the board is going to run the organization. So nobody owns a 501c3 public charity. You can't be the owner of a public charity. It's there for the public. There's going to be a board that's managing it. You might sit on the board. You might be the founder, but you're not going to be the owner. In contrast, if you have a private foundation, you get to keep all of the control. So you might have a board that can advise and so on and make decisions, but the board might consist of just you and your spouse, or you and other family members. So you can keep as much of the control as you want in your private foundation. If it's a non-operating foundation, all of the money in that organization, in that foundation, has to be ultimately given to another 501c3 organization in order for them to spend. So one year you might give some money to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and let them, go and help make wishes come true for kids. One year you might give some money to your church, pay tithing or that sort of thing. One year you might, or even in the same year, you might do it, right? But you might give some money to the Habitat for Humanity, and, for them to be able to go out and help people to make homes. You might give it to, Charity Water to help third world countries be able to have access to clean water. You might give to any number of nonprofit 501c3 eligible organizations, and then they use that money for other things. So we call that a grant. So you have money in your private foundation, and then you can create grants to give to other organizations for them to use that money to go do good things, projects, or even scholarships for individuals and that sort of thing. But basically, you're providing money to other organizations. It's very similar to like a donor-advised fund, with the difference being that a donor-advised fund, you really have given up the control to another organization, and the level of input that you have is based on what that organization wants to give back to you. But in either case, whatever you've put into your foundation results in a tax write-off for you. So as long as you're the primary contributor and you set up your private foundation, you can keep control of it, and then you're going to be able to write off up to 60%, if it's cash contributions, up to 60% of your income for the year with charitable deductions. If they're not cash, then you're limited to a 30% on in-kind contributions. So if you want to actually have the ability to do your own charitable work and do projects and maybe travel and have some of these expenses that you would maybe have for yourself included as part of the charitable offering that you're contributing to the world, then you can do that through an operating foundation. It functions very similarly, with the exception being that all of the projects are handled internally by the foundation rather than having to give the money to another organization to do. An operating foundation can give grants, it can give scholarships to other organizations, but it doesn't have to. It can run its own projects. So, for example, if you want to go to Africa and dig wells and to be able to help people to, have clean water, you can do that. And the expenses of doing that would all run through the foundation, and then you would, keep your books and everything to be able to show the IRS in case there was any questions about it. But you would actually be able to run your own projects, and if you wanted to hire staff and you wanted to, have other individuals involved in that process, you can also run it through your private foundation. So I have clients that, some of my clients that have a lot of means or a lot of assets, and we do tax planning for them, and they say, well, we like this idea of being able to run our own projects, run our own, charitable works, but we also like the idea of just having a fund that we contribute on a regular basis to other things. And maybe they even want to receive, donations from the public for some of the projects that they want to do. And they want to really, brand it a certain way. And so there's maybe a reason to have both. In most situations, you don't need to have both. But in some situations, limited situations, it might make sense to have both types of private foundations. In any case, the idea of the private foundation becomes a very powerful concept for tax planning, because whatever you put into it can then be invested, it can accumulate, it can continue in that foundation. You don't have to spend it in the same tax year. So you do have to spend a minimum of 5% of what's in the foundation on any given year for charitable purpose. And we can make that purpose very broad if we need to, right? So we want to give you the most flexibility to be able to do different things as possible. Or we can make it very narrow and very specific. And if you're not going to be around for much longer or that sort of thing, you may want to have a very specific instruction on what happens and what it's used for and so on and so forth. But in a private foundation, either way, however we structure the charitable purpose, a minimum of 5% of the assets of the foundation need to be spent every year on that purpose. So again, you're earmarking money for specific use. We had a client that he was exiting from a business. He was selling his business, and he was going to have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital gains taxes on the sale of his business. He had already sold his business, and he was going to be paying these taxes anyway. And he said, how do I reduce my tax exposure? So we talked about possibly setting up a private foundation and offsetting his taxes with his charitable deduction that he would get from putting money into this foundation. And he said, well, I like that idea. I definitely want to give it to charity. But is there any way that I can be involved in that and that it can benefit me or my family? And we said, well, what are some of the charitable things that you're interested in? And he said, I really believe that inner city youth don't get opportunities to play certain kinds of sports. He says, I'm a big golfer. I like golf. If I could golf every weekend, all the time, and different golf courses around the world, that would be my dream come true. And I said, we can make that dream a reality if we set up the foundation properly. So what if, when you travel, let's say you go to Florida, you go to Boca Raton, you go to Atlanta, you go to some of the best golf courses in the country, what if you could just call up a local high school and have them send you a couple students who maybe are lower income, don't get to golf on a frequent basis, but are interested in it. And you put together a foursome and you go out on the golf course and you give these students an opportunity to be able to learn how to golf or to be able to practice their golf. And then for anybody who shows promise, right, you keep a list of all these students that you've gone golfing with, and you allow them to be able to apply for potential scholarships to sponsor them as golfers, right, going into college or as part of their high school teams. Now, that is a project that would fit within a charitable purpose, but it also allows my client to go out and golf and do what he loves and have it paid for by his foundation, right? So it benefits him, and it could benefit, potentially people within the family. But it's embedded in the charitable purpose that ultimately he's there for in the first place. So that's the creativity that you need to think about as you're going through the possibility of setting up a private foundation and how you would use it for your own personal needs and also to be able to make a difference in the world. When we combine a private foundation with other strategies like charitable trusts, or like other gifting opportunities, it can become a very powerful tool to be able to not just make a difference in the world, but also to be able to help your family have the opportunity to learn what it means to do charitable giving, to be able to handle some of these projects on an ongoing basis, and to not feel bad about what you're spending on the charitable works that you are doing. So again, a private foundation is a very powerful tool if you're interested in sitting down and learning about how it might benefit your personal situation. We can certainly have that conversation. We advise you to sit down with competent legal counsel if you want to set one of these up. And we appreciate you joining in today. So please like, subscribe, or follow us on wherever you get your podcasts. Or if you're watching our recording here on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get the other recordings and other versions of this podcast that will be coming out or that have come out in the past. We appreciate you joining, and we'll look forward to talking to you again in the near future.